London, capital of the UK, tourist hotspot, home of nearly 8.8 million people, a city where transport really matters. But is it doing this right? In this documentary, I'm going to explore places around the world where transport is also vital, seeing the solutions that have been put in place to cope with transporting the vast amount of people that live and commute in the cities. I'll be looking at New York, Amsterdam, and Masdar City. New York is the classic. Comparing it to London, it's got the same types of transport: a subway, city bikes. Amsterdam will be looking into green ways of travelling, like bikes. And Masdar City is looking into the future with driverless personal rapid transport systems. This is London transport. Does it need improving? London. How does the capital of the UK currently attempt to handle nearly 1.4 billion people a year that either commute or tourist around the city? Currently there are 3 main methods. 4 if you include cars, but traffic slows these down way too much. I'll come back to that point later. The first that I want to mention is the London Underground. The most expansive tube network in the world, with approximately 402 kilometres of rails with 270 different stations to hop on and off at. It is mostly a constant blur of motion, more so in city centre stops and especially at rush hour. It's an easy to understand hop on, hop off system.
Main line and the tube are convenient and easy to use. I find them well signed. There's lots of information. It's really easy to navigate. People are on hand if you've got problems, particularly on the tube is well staffed.
So long as you have the right ticket or card, it will get you near enough to where you want to be. It was designed with speed and efficiency in mind. By having 2 or 3 minutes on average between stops, this makes it really easy to figure out travel times. Just take the number of stations to your stop, times that by 3 and you've got a rough time. It's generally a fast service. It has to be to keep up with the demand of the city. There will always be a train coming every 2 or 3 minutes after the previous one, unless there's any problems on the line. So if you do happen to miss one, it isn't too much of a worry. Now it's fast, but is it comfy? No. Comfort is a big thing for travellers of any description.
The last time I went to London, I didn't enjoy the underground experience at all because it was packed hot and it sort of triggers sort of anxiety. I had a bit of a panic.
I don't like travelling in rush hour and do my best not to because I hate the crowds and being underground. When it's peak times, it can be a bit of a nightmare with the numbers of people.
Especially daily commuters that have to do this every day, every week. Imagine coming out of a long day's work, tired and exhausted. The last thing you'd want to do is stand around with people jammed up against you as hundreds of people cram into each train. The 2009 stock are rated for a capacity of 876 per train. The underground is an uncomfortable place to be. Only the outer city zones aren't like this. But the part that the majority of people experience is close, sweaty, hot. At the less commonly used stations and sometimes at off-peak times, it can be bearable or even nice. But if the people don't get to you, the noise will. But still, at least it's nice to have a seat. Remember back when I said the trains were fast? Well, they are. Getting to and from them can feel like it takes ages though. There's just endless escalators. Angel even has a 60-metre long escalator.
They're 60 metres in length, they go through a height difference of 27 metres, and they used to be the longest escalators in the whole of the UK.
Some stations do have lifts, and some do have stairs for those that are brave. but no matter what, it will take some time getting down to and up from the trains. It was designed with speed and efficiency in mind, but could it be quicker to run? Well, in 2014, a couple of freerunners tested this between Mansion House and Cannon Street. One stood in the train while the other ran up the escalators, through the ticket barriers, across the streets, through the barriers, and got back on the train, proving that it could be quicker to run. Another race that was held to test the speed of not only the Underground, but a range of methods to travel across London was when Top Gear held a race between public transport, a bike, a boat, and a car, which lost. Unsurprising considering it couldn't really cut through any traffic. Public transport came third, so it isn't the quickest method, but it's still better than a car. The boat came in at second, which puts the question of, would it actually be quicker to have a transport network that goes up and down the river? But the bike came in first. Now this was a special edition carbon fibre road bike, but there has to be something about being able to dart in and out of traffic that is appealing and quick. This brings me neatly on to the next method London currently has, the Santander Cycles. Previously known as Barclays Cycle Hire, or unofficially known as Boris bikes. What are they? They're a bike hire system where there are docking stations where you can travel from station to station, paying a couple of quid to take a bike out and return it.
Yeah, it's very easy, £2 for 24 hours, as long as you bring it back in half an hour.
There are 700 docking stations and 10,000 bikes.
What are they like?
We have an original and a brand new generation bike. The tyres themselves are smaller. They've now gone down to 24 inches. We have a much more comfortable seat. It's now a softer gel seat. The handle that you use to adjust the seat is much easier to control. Straight up, one-handed there, up and down. Got slightly elongated mud guards there to protect your clothing. More lighting at the front, brake lighting at the back, as well as the wonderful blaze lighting built in as well.
Are they cheap? Well, it costs £2 to access them for 24 hours with the first 30 minutes of each journey included. Longer journeys will cost £2 more for each 30 minutes after that. There's also a membership scheme at £90 a year which gives unlimited access to them. It's definitely worth it for a regular user. So yes, they are cheap. Are they easy to use? Well, there's even an app that tells you where the locations of the stops are and how many bikes there are at each stop. It's a very simple method to just go up to a machine, say hire a bike, insert your card, pay for the bike, and get a code for a bike that allows you to use them. So using them is very easy. So why doesn't everyone use this cheap and convenient option? There's two reasons, apart from cycling isn't everyone's cup of tea. Weather and safety. In London it rains on average nearly 1 in 3 days, and can also be windy and unpleasant. That's just the British weather. As for safety, the dense traffic can mean that drivers may not see the bike darting in and out and around of vehicles. Also, cycle lanes are usually included in bus lanes. Yes, this can mean the bikes can easily bypass traffic, but what else uses bus lanes? Buses.
I'm in a bus lane, which is good, I can use them. However, the other thing they use is them buses.
Always stopping, always pulling out.
Don't pull out, don't pull out, don't pull out! I hate buses. Stinky.
Buses and bikes are a bit of an odd mix, as one can quite easily crush the other. But moving on to buses, with these lanes they can skip through traffic, making it quicker than cars. So what do they like to use? I asked train and bus spotter Nick Cant, who has been using London buses for nearly 60 years now.
I've used public transport a lot, as my youthful interests have included bus and train spotting, and I've retained that interest, particularly in buses, and I still enjoy riding on trains, buses and trams too. With my experience I can use them easily, but for people who are not used to using them or are making an unfamiliar journey, I'm sure that more information is needed to make their journey easier. There is a lot of information on the internet, like the TfL website, but making a bus journey could be quite problematical compared with just jumping in your car and driving somewhere. I find buses a great way of getting around. You can see things, and with improvements like bus priorities, more information, etc., I'm sure they could be even better. London hasn't gone for reintroducing or retaining tram systems like many cities, British, European, worldwide. Trams are great mass movers, but they're necessarily restricted as to routes, whereas buses can be much more flexible. But of course that means that if there's traffic congestion, without priorities, they can be held up in the congestion. As with general public transport, I think there's a need for bus priorities and much better connection between trains, tubes and buses to make journeys as easy and attractive as possible. I'm very passionate about the need for good public transport, and particularly in London. I'd love to see far more use of buses and trams and tubes and fewer car journeys being made.
So as a whole, the thing that London can do is just to connect transport networks better. Just make use of having all these different methods of transporting people and just having better connections to get you from the trains to the buses, from the buses back to the trains, just to get you to exactly where you need to be. Because at the moment there is too much competition between them trying to steal passengers from each other, when, as has been said by other people, they're really competing against cars. Are there other places doing this better? Moving on to New York. This powerhouse of a city is home to nearly 20 million people and is one of, if not the busiest place on the planet. 7 out of 10 people who work in the city commute in and out daily. With having this vast amount of people always moving in and out, there must be a sufficient solution to keep up. From above, it appears not. What do you think of when you think of New York's roads? Gridlock traffic. It is packed. So what's the point in using a cab? There's 2 reasons why you would. They're convenient. There's always going to be one around.
Another thing that's fantastic in New York is the taxi system. There's literally taxis all along this road. You can pretty much pick up a taxi anywhere you want.
And the second reason is they're comfy. You have a nice seat, you can choose the air conditioning temperature, most of them have a TV inside. But they're still in that gridlock traffic, so they're not going anywhere, and the rate is always going up since it's still burning fuel. To demonstrate these costs is James Verdi, someone that used to commute into central Manhattan from Staten Island every day for 4 years.
If you were to take an Uber, as an example, from my house to, say, my school, you're looking at about $120. You're looking at almost the same amount of that for a taxi as well. You're going through bridges and tunnels, so you're paying tolls on top of that. To put that in context, right now the subway fare in New York City is $275. So $275 versus $120, it's much less expensive to take the transit system in New York City than it is to take a taxi or Uber.
With the subway being ridiculously cheaper, why not just take that? Most people do. It's probably because of its cheap price and the ease of using the ticket machines.
What's cool is there's so many different places that you can board the subway using these machines right over here, and you just buy a ticket, you jump on the subway, you jump off, and there's a variety of options that you can use for the transportation. You can buy all-day passes, you can buy one-way trips, you can buy multiple passes, you can put 20 bucks on a card and see how long that lasts you.
Now the issue with London's underground was the comfort. Is New York's subway any better? No, it isn't. If anything, it's worse off, as it hasn't had the same amount of updates and upgrades in the 113 years that it's been operating. Yes, it has had extensions, refurbishments and repairs to try to streamline the service for all its users, but it is nowhere near the amount that it needs.
A welcome sight for passengers Friday afternoon. Subways running again. This after picture of a horrendous morning commute that left thousands stuck on trains and in stations, sweating and hoping to get to work at some point.
It's still having failures that cause delays, which can be quite a major problem, especially considering how frequent they can be.
Many delays. I actually came from 139th Street and I had to take an Uber to 96th Street in order to get to here. Always delays.
Now, you would think with one of the busiest transit systems in the world, innovation would be a top priority, but what you're finding is the subways have very aged infrastructure.
The MTA admits that it desperately needs to change its current hard-to-repair fixed-block signal system, which is so old, the only way the agency can get parts is to manufacture them itself.
And what this means is the service is extremely unreliable.
It's ridiculous because it's almost every day.
Going along with the aged infrastructure is there's no AC. So if it's 95 degrees outside on a hot July day, it's 110 degrees in the subway system, so it's definitely not the most reliable means if you're looking at convenience and comfort.
And just like anywhere else at peak times, it becomes incredibly close and sweaty, and really isn't a nice place to be. On these hot days, you'd prefer to be outside. This is where the city bikes come into play. They are much like the Boris bikes in London. You pay a small fee to take the bike out and put it back at another station. These cost $10 for the day or $95 for an annual pass, which is a bargain. The annual pass also has a key to quickly unlock the bikes, compared to the trouble that Casey Neistat went through on a one-time use.
Now we have bike share, City Bike. So I figured I'd try it out. Now, full disclosure, I'd never ridden one before and I didn't really know what to expect. I glossed over the directions and then got to the touch screen. It was slow and not super responsive. Plus there were way too many screens to cycle through.
He even shows how it's less painful than owning a bike in New York City, as there's a high chance of his own bike being stolen. When I went to New York with a group of about 15 of us, we went to a separate cycle hire shop as the long-winded touchscreen options list was too much to go through 15 times. Also, when you're in a group, you can go into these cycle hire shops and try to get a group discount, which we did. I've only been around Central Park, which is lovely, but the streets are a mess. You have to dart in and out of traffic. And as for the cycle lanes that skip past this traffic, they always have things in the way of them. So what can London learn from New York? Well, if anything, I think that New York could learn from London. The bikes in New York were one thing. The bikes in Amsterdam are something else. For Amsterdam, I'm going to move a couple of hours north to Groningen to explore how bikes have been prioritised there. Amsterdam itself has a system of bike lanes that go almost everywhere. It has these bike lanes on the outside of every road. It has them by pedestrianised areas and by themselves to connect different parts of the city. The Netherlands as itself is a very green nation. It really shows this with its new town layouts like Groningen.
Groningen is probably one of the best bicycling cities in the world. We go there because it's a city that Dutch cities look to for inspiration and examples and ideas when they want to improve bicycling.
It just had bike lanes already planned before the whole town was built, so that bikes are the more popular form of transportation. To get across the town, bike paths have a more direct and therefore quicker route than cars on the roads.
The city centre is diverted in 4 quarters, which means that car traffic can't go from one quarter to the other. They have to go along the little ring road which leads along the town centre.
As well as being a quicker and shorter route, it's also cheaper, as cars cost more than bikes, as well as the fuel and insurance costs on top of that.
You can go faster on a bicycle to the city centre than by car. It is cheaper to go there on a bicycle. Imagine what will happen if all these bicycles that you see in the street will be cars and people in cars. Then everything would be jammed.
Demi Guertsen is a local student there, and she sums up why she uses a bike.
I'm from the Netherlands and I live in Groningen, which is a city completely in the north of the Netherlands. And my experience of taking transport to get somewhere, public transport, is that I generally take the bike when it's about 20 minutes cycle to get from where I live to my university. And I like taking the bike because it's easy, it's always there, you don't have to wait for it compared to the bus, and it gets you literally everywhere. There's places where the buses don't drive or can't drive, and you can get there by bike. And especially because the Netherlands, or at least Groningen, is really made for a biking city. So there's a lot of facilities, you can always park your bike somewhere.
So how does Amsterdam differ from this? It had the cycle lanes added after it was built and was not pre-planned. This makes it a little more of a mess with bike lanes going in every direction. It can seem very chaotic at times. But does it work? Yes, because everyone is used to it. But when you're an outsider and not used to cycling with hundreds of others darting around you, it can be a difficult situation. Yes, there are accidents.
Wait, Karina.
But on the whole, it is a better system. But could London go bike crazy like the Netherlands? London already has many cyclists, not quite to the extent of the Netherlands, but currently not enough cycle lanes to cope with that sort of demand.
Cycle lane, 1, 2, 3 metres of it, and then I'm back under that bus.
There would need to be a complete rethink like Amsterdam had in the 1970s.
In the 70s we had this oil crisis, we had environmental crisis, we had a lot of fatalities in traffic, and then the whole society said we do not want to depend on oil.
Safety would be the main concern, as here in Britain we're all very much guided by health and safety rules. Amsterdam also have trams. Are they a good idea? They run off electricity coming from power lines suspended above the ground to avoid having live rails that could potentially injure people. This also keeps the city's air clean with not having large diesel buses going around. So this is good. However, the power lines are a bit of an eyesore, and the grooves in the ground that the trams are guided by happen to just be big enough for bike tyres, which is unfortunate considering that it is the cycling capital of the world. So when trams do cross over the roads and cycle lanes, there can be incidents. But they are a very good solution despite the issues with bikes, as they are able to run alongside the roads and are able to pass by any traffic that happens to be about. They run much like buses that are on a guided course, with stations and stops around the city. Other cities in England do use trams, like Sheffield and Manchester. Even London uses trams, but not on an extensive citywide scale. But why not? Possibly because of needing overhead cabling that would cover up the capital. There was a plan to introduce trams into central London, but that got cancelled due to lack of funding in 2008, so it is unlikely they will be introduced anywhere in the near future. Moving on to concepts and current developments in urban transportation. Masdar City in Abu Dhabi is home to a personal rapid transit system, or PRT for short. To Get There is the name of the company that designs and supplies these PRT systems. They first appeared in October 2002 for a brief period of time in Florade to transport users to the top of a hill. They were judged to be a huge success on the 700 metre track, as the small battery operated pods were able to get 4 people up a hill on each 4-minute journey for a couple of hours before needing to charge up. This meant they had a potential to carry 600 passengers between the 25 pods in operation. Going up and down a hill is the most strenuous sort of task for a small electric vehicle, as this will drain the battery. And with these 25 pods being able to do that continuously for a couple of hours, that proves them to be a great thing, especially in 2002. Moving 8 years down the line to Masdar PRT, which opened in November 2010, was bound to be successful, and is. The system currently still only has 2 stations on a 1.4 kilometre track, as most of the city is still being developed and built. The network is operational for 18 hours a day, every day. The 10 vehicles operate an on-demand service for anyone wanting one. They charge up between journeys on their docking stations, which allows them to run all day, rather than needing one big charge every couple of hours. Another plus point for this is that all the power that's used to recharge these vehicles is all green energy, As Mazda is a self-sufficient city, it can power itself as well as sell off extra electricity that it happens to generate from the massive arrays of solar panels it has. Mazda City is definitely a superb example of what a city should do in terms of power supplying. But what about the PRT? Yes, the PRT is a great concept and realisation, and should be good to keep an eye on as it develops and grows. But could it work for London? I don't know. I don't think many people would know until the Mazda PRT is expanded, as the type of system has only been seen going between a couple of stations and not through a whole city. As for putting some self-driving PRT system in London, it would be far more comfortable than current methods. But as for quicker, I'm not sure if it would cope with the sheer volume of people moving in, out and around the city. Looking back at everything, what can London do better? A bit of everything, really. I think the main thing it can do is make the multiple systems work together more. They sort of do already, allowing travel card holders to hop between different services, but sometimes they can still seem like they're separate businesses trying to get numbers through the door. Just look at what people are currently saying. Just these simple things can make the whole network a more attractive place to commute. And making it a more attractive place to commute means that there'll be less cars, making the system better. It's an endless cycle. It either goes one way downhill or the other way uphill. I also reckon that London needs to trial some innovative tech, like the sort seen in Mazda City, just to see if it could potentially be done and if it could work, but we'll never know until it's tried, as what happens on paper isn't always what happens in real life.